This episode is brought to you by the Disney Plus Hulu Max bundle with plans starting at just $16.99 a month. Stream the latest seasons of The Last of Us on Max, Andor on Disney Plus, and the final season of The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. All of these and more streaming soon. Terms apply. Visit Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle.com for more details.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia. Jesse's the chairman of the party out in Suffolk County, the Republican Party, as well as vice chair of the state Republican Party. And in the studio with us is Eric Levine, a noted lawyer in New York City, as well as a great commentator on political, social, and government issues. Welcome back, Eric. Eric is back by great popular demand. Thanks for being here.
I'm honored. Thank you.
So, to start the discussion, there was a runoff election, Jesse, in Georgia. And a funny thing happened on the way to the runoff and having a 50-50 split between the Republicans and Democrats in the United States Senate. The Republicans lost it again. It's now 51-49. What do you think about that, Jesse?
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in the result. I'm disappointed the mechanics leading up to the result. I think Herschel Walker, despite some of his challenges during this race, did an outstanding job, especially closing this gap in the last weeks. Let me just point out that so much was being said about voter suppression in Georgia with its new rules and such that it actually activated and more voters came out and participated than they have in the past in the old rules. So I think it's a testament that when you have proper election rules that people will come out and vote and participate and also have trust in the system. But I think leading up to this situation is a fault of the mechanics and the Republican National Committee and the Senate Republican Committee. I think that since we had no chance of winning a majority, that I don't believe that the Senate Republicans were invested totally in there. Only a few of the senators came in the campaign with Herschel Walker. We should have had all 49 in there. I think money could have been thrown into this race because there's still an importance of having a 50-50 Senate and having the Kamala Harris to break ties. But more on an emotional and energy point of view, it would have provided us a boost as a Republican Party, both locally and nationally, to take back that seat, to knock off a sitting Democrat incumbent, like we've done so much here in Long Island and New York and such, and throughout the other parts of the regions. It's just disappointing. I'm hopeful and very happy about how in the closing weeks and in closing days that Herschel Walker performed in this race. I love that the electoral system they put in place there demonstrated it works and there's confidence in it. But I'm really disappointed with our national leaders on the Senate side. It really clearly this race demonstrated the difference between aggressiveness on the House side with Kevin McCarthy and the Republican leadership there, and the kind of like on the sidelines type of attitude that McConnell and the Senate Republicans took in this race.
All right, Eric, what's your take on this?
I have a slightly different take. I have a very different perspective here. First, where I do agree with Jesse is on the voter suppression nonsense. Joe Biden should be ashamed of himself for accusing the Georgia election law changes, accusing it of being Jim Crow 2.0. Voters showed up in record numbers, whites, blacks, Hispanics, everyone showed up. The notion that there was going to be any voter suppression, it was a lie then, and it's a lie now. And Joe Biden should be ashamed of himself for using such heated rhetoric. But where I disagree with Jesse is I was not buoyed by Herschel Walker closing the gap because it wasn't Herschel Walker closing the gap. It was Governor Kemp closing the gap. Don't you remember in the original election in Georgia before the runoff, Governor Kemp won by 7 or 8 points, beat Stacey Abrams, and Raffinger, the Attorney General, also won by a landslide. These two individuals both rejected the Trump lie of a stolen election and the Republican primary voter rewarded them. They did not embrace the lie. They rejected Trump and nominated Kemp and nominated Ratzenberger, and they won with landslides. The one statewide candidate that did not win by landslide or win at all was Herschel Walker. He got a runoff because he was Donald Trump's guy. Herschel Walker lost because he is Donald Trump's guy. He lost the runoff because he is Donald Trump's guy. General election voters are with Republicans on issues of the border, inflation, taxes, school choice, parental control, you name it. On the big issues facing the United States, voters are with us. But they cannot get past Donald Trump. So long as Donald Trump is the Republican brand, we will lose. Compare Georgia to Arizona. In Georgia, they're both purple states. In Georgia, Kemp and Ratzenberger won. And in Arizona, a purple state where Trump nominees all won the primaries, Blake Masters and Kari Lake, they all embraced Trump and the lie of the stolen election. They all lost. So the reason why Herschel Walker was able to close the gap in the closing days is because Brian Kemp brought the state machine out to help him. But the Trump weight was too much for him to lift. Where we also lose now that we're 51-49, the House is going to want to have that the Republicans control. They're going to have investigations, particularly, let's say, Hunter Biden, what happened in Afghanistan, oversight. But now that it's 51-49, the Democrats will have free and unfettered control to be able to have their own investigations and subpoena power as a counterweight to the House investigations. So we're just going to create a lot of noise and people aren't going to pay attention. And what may have been the House investigations, which may have been of great impact for the American people to watch, there's just going to be so much noise, people are going to start to ignore it. But I think the bigger picture right now, the question we have to ask ourselves is, and what Georgia lays out for us, is what is the role of Donald Trump going forward? I would suggest it is now time for the Republican Party to say enough of Donald Trump, go away. He is the first president since Hoover to lose the House, the Senate, and the White House in a single term. He then went in 2020 to Georgia and intentionally lost 2 Senate races for us, both Loeffler and Perdue. Had we won either of those races, we would have had control of the Senate, and the entire Biden agenda, progressive agenda, would have been ground to a halt. Chuck Schumer would not have been majority leader. Mitch McConnell would have been. So Biden would have had to have compromised with the Republican Senate. Donald Trump is responsible for the progressives having control of our government and for the damage that was done by progressives for the last 2 years. So I think it's time for Donald Trump to move to the side. He also stayed out of Virginia when Governor Youngkin was running for office, and Youngkin won. So I'm not sure what it tells us, what more we need to know regarding Donald Trump's role here. Donald Trump is a loser, and Republicans will continue to lose elections so long as he is the brand. I would argue that there are 2 existential threats facing the United States today. One is the progressive agenda of Joe Biden and the Marxist, neo-Marxists and socialists in the Democratic Party, and the other is Donald Trump. Because let's put aside for the moment that he has dinner with Ye and Nick Fuentes, a well-known Nazi, an anti-Semite. His statement the other day that we should ignore the Constitution, put it aside, so that he can be appointed president, is an incredibly dangerous statement. Every official that takes office takes the oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Donald Trump has already told us that he cannot uphold that oath. And anyone who supports Donald Trump has compromised in their ability to uphold that oath. So I think it's time for Donald Trump to move aside and for others to take the mantle. And if he won't move aside, it is time for Republican leadership to start publicly asking for it, and for the donor base to make it clear that for candidates that support Donald Trump, they're not going to see any money.
All right, my turn. Since both of you guys are Republicans and I'm the House Democrat, trying to be as objective as possible, let me begin by saying I believe that Donald Trump was an excellent president on public policy issues. He was right about the economy. He was right about the border. He was right about Israel. He was right about national security. He was right about the members of NATO contributing their fair share. He was right on so many issues. He was against the culture of wokeism, and he was for law and order. So, on the record, Donald Trump was an excellent president. What Donald Trump was not was a good political leader. In fact, it's very funny to say that somebody was able to take himself out of the business community and his first race for elective office, make himself president of the United States, is not a good politician. That sounds counterintuitive, but the fact is people were not voting in 2016 for Donald Trump as Donald Trump. They were voting for him as a symbol. He was the anti-Hillary Clinton. He was the anti-Barack Obama. He was the anti-John Kerry. People were sick to death of the left-wing Democrats, and they voted for Trump as an antidote to that crazy left-wing agenda of my party, the Democratic Party. Now, what went wrong in this midterm election cycle? There was a civil war within the Republican Party, particularly with respect to the Senate seats. It also impacted on some of the House races and some of the governorships, but particularly with respect to the war for the control of the Senate. It was the McConnell people versus the Trump people. Now, people were bragging, and they did this on Cats at Night when I was on the show, and Dick Morris and I had this argument about this. Dick said, oh, look, he's a big winner. 97% of the races he's won. And I said to Dick Morris, who I like and know, I said, Dick, that's nice. I said, that's the primaries. How about November? What everybody forgets is that the Republican Party is a minority party. As a minority party, it has to have a big tent and it has to bring in independents. The candidates that were selected in the primary because of the Trump constituency were weaker candidates going into November. The Senate could have been won by the Republicans if they had more moderate, more centrist candidates, and they didn't have, as Eric correctly pointed out, this baggage on them where they had to talk about the 2020 election is stolen and the whole Trump agenda of grievance and victimization. And that's a problem. And some of the candidates were better than other candidates. I met with and had lunch with Dr. Oz, and I thought Dr. Oz was actually a very good candidate and a very decent man, and we've been lucky. And what do they elect in Pennsylvania? They elected a guy who's totally unqualified to be United States Senator, totally unqualified actually to hold any important office, Fetterman, and yet they vote against Oz for Fetterman, even though Fetterman has no clue of what's going on, and he's going to be run by the Democratic machine and by his wife. This is dangerous stuff, and that's because Oz was identified with Trump. Going to what Eric said about not having a 50-50, that's enormously important because in the Senate rules, if it had been 50-50, you divide up the committees half and half. You can't get subpoenas now out of a committee by the Republicans. The Senate is going to be totally controlled by the Democrats, and they have an edge of that extra vote. So they're not going to have the real subpoena power. They're not going to be able to control the agenda of scheduling of hearings. And the subject matters are not going to be what they want to be heard. And even if they do a great job in the House of Representatives making exposés of malfeasance and misfeasance of the Democrats and the Biden administration, you're not going to get a full hearing and a full airing because people like Ron Johnson from Wisconsin was doing great work. It was not going to be able to carry forth what's found in the House hearings over to the Senate side. And that's a real problem. Now, I just got the signal from Jesse. That was a quick early segment, Jesse. So
absolutely,
we're going to take a break. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Eric Levine, distinguished attorney and political commentator, great essayist, and my very good friend, esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Stay tuned. We'll be right back for more interesting conversation.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and Eric Levine, distinguished attorney and political commentator and essayist. All right, so let's pick up, Eric, on what we were talking about before. The question was, what should the Republican Party do about Trump? You alluded to some of it before. Would you keep going?
So,
and Jesse correctly said at the break, let's talk about what the Democrats should do about Biden as well.
So assuming Donald Trump stays in the race, and I have every reason to expect that he would because he just thinks he's the greatest thing since the invention of the wheel, how do we stop Donald Trump from becoming the nominee? I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump has roughly 25 to maybe 30% support within the Republican Party. I mean, solid support. So that leaves somewhere between 70 and 75% of the party that's perfectly willing to support somebody else. But if we have what we had in 2020, when you have 15, 16, 17 candidates dividing up that 70, 75%, Donald Trump's 20, 25% will win primary after primary after primary, and ultimately he gets the nomination. Republicans are going to have to show the same kind of self-control that the Democrats did when they rallied around Joe Biden when they got to South Carolina. The fear was, oh my God, if we have so many people running, Bernie Sanders will eventually be the nominee, and we can't have that happen. So they got together, and some of the party leaders, I'm sure Nancy Pelosi in particular, threatened to break a few kneecaps, and you had a massive exodus from the race by the more centrist Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg. I know the idea of using those names and the word centrist in the same sentence seems oxymoronic, right. But everything's relative. So, and they rallied around Joe Biden, and South Carolina launched his election, and which is why they're trying to change the rules in the Democratic nominating process. But anyway, so the Republicans need to really narrow the field, and they need to narrow it quickly to 3 or 4, at the most 5, but I think 3 or 4 candidates, so that the donor base has their say. You can have a robust primary. It doesn't require to have 30 people, 15 people to have a robust primary and a robust debate. And that way Donald Trump can't win, even if he stays in the race with his 25%. And I would suggest of that 25% that Trump has, 90% of those people are rational, normal human beings who would gladly vote for a Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or Tim Scott or Mike Pompeo. But you do have a roughly maybe 10% in that 25% that will only vote for Donald Trump. But who are those folks? They're the white nationalists. They're the QAnon people. They're the Proud Boys. These are people that we want outside the party. We don't want them in the party. They're part of a freak show. And if we all remember as children when we would go to the circus, we all liked the big tent. The Republicans win if we can have a bigger tent. But as large as the tent was, we always remember at the circus that the freak show was outside the tent. And we need to do the same thing here. We need to keep the QAnon folks, the Proud Boy folks, the freaks outside. And if we don't kowtow to them, and if we are publicly saying that we want you out, we increase the likelihood significantly that we get suburban women who are a critical voting bloc for the Republicans. Independents, we cannot win without independents. We'll make Republican moderates much more comfortable and maybe win over a few moderate Democrats. But we can't do that if the nuts are in the party. So we need to publicly say we reject them and we want you. We want suburban women. And I think that's really the only way to stop Donald Trump should he stay in the race. What do we do about Joe Biden? That's going to be somewhat academic. He's a sitting president. If Joe Biden decides he wants to run again, maybe there'll be one person, 2 people that primary him. Remember, Jimmy Carter, as pathetic as he was as a president, only Ted Kennedy ran against him. It ultimately probably lost the election for him because it wounded him so badly. But I'm not sure who is going to challenge Joe Biden, because the challenge would have to come from the progressive left but he has sprinted so far to the left in terms of his policies already. I don't see anybody challenging him. If Joe Biden wants to run again, I don't think he's going to be opposed. But I do think that any Republican, any normal Republican, even Richard, could win against Joe Biden. Donald Trump is the only Republican that would not beat Joe Biden. And if Republicans have a survival instinct, we must reject Donald Trump.
Jesse, Eric has unloaded a lot. It's all yours.
I just want to go after the premise. I mean, the way you almost framed that is the base of our party is made up of white nationalists and all that, and that's not the case.
No, but that isn't. I'm sorry. I can't let you get. That is not what I said. I said 10% of Donald Trump's 25% is that group.
No, but those are people, unfortunately, that if they're registered Republicans, are able to vote on this. Our party is far more greater defined than a wingnut or any type of those individuals. And as a party chairman, I reject those individuals as well. But it just sounded a little bit like you were defining the base of our party that way, and I wanted to clear that up. And as moving forward, I think any party needs to move forward in always new, fresh ideas and new, fresh people. As the judge said when we started off here, Trump's presidency, his policies were supported greatly by the people of this country. His antics and such, not so much. And let me go back to Georgia for a bit. I'm sorry, I took it as automatic because this is where I come from, that when you're the head of a political apparatus, whether it's the Suffolk County Republican Committee, the New York State Republican Committee, the Georgia Republican Committee, or Georgia's governor, that you always bring the full force of your party apparatus to win an election. So I never meant to discard Governor Kemp because he did an outstanding job. But I mean, that should be a given in every race. The party apparatus and those in charge of it, regardless of it, needs to move forward in one way to win, because that's what we're here to be. So we can ensure the 50-50 Senate. That's important so that we have equal clout. And now that our investigations in the House majority are not going to be lost everywhere else. There is a time and place where every party needs to go through a metamorphosis and move forward with new faces and new dynamics. I think that this party has a big number of, just setting Donald Trump aside. You mentioned too, Robert DeSantis, Nikki Haley. We have Pompeo. These are individuals of people of character, people who have served, that know the functions of government, know the private sector as well, and know how to get things done in a way that's going to benefit the people of this country. But, to expect that Donald Trump is just going to go away, that's not going to happen. I believe that the electorate has begun that process of moving on from that era, and I believe that the party apparatus should always be there for the candidate, whether they're identified with one person or another. The idea was to make sure we had that 50-50 Senate. So, and this party and the electorate's moving on, whether it's in the general election, even the Republican Party primary voters, they're moving on from candidates from last year, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Somebody's out of this process. And we're seeing that. And we have a great stable of candidates. It'll be an electorate. And I believe we have a very informed electorate that will be able to advance a nomination for someone to compete against Joe Biden, whether he runs or whether he doesn't run. I mean, we've on this show have talked about a number of times. Should we move on from Trump? Should we move on from Biden? Should we move on from Hillary Clinton? Where is the fresh new faces? I do believe that the fresh new faces, based on common sense that protects the middle class and shares the values of the founding fathers, are with those in the Republican Party who have served either in Congress, in Senate, in cabinet positions, or in the governorships.
Well, Eric, we agree that we need to move on. The problem is if Donald Trump gets the nomination. If you have 15, 16 people running in the primary, Donald Trump's 25% carries the day. So that's why we need to keep the field narrow. But I want to come back to something that Richard was saying and dovetail with something that you just made the mention of. The party apparatus comes together. You have to support all the candidates. Here's one of the great ironies. Donald Trump nominates or helps nominate in the primaries a bunch of his folks. And then lets them, winds them up and lets them go. Doesn't put any money into it. Doesn't help them in any way.
Absolutely.
The great irony is it was Mitch McConnell. It was Mitch McConnell who used his PAC to support Republican candidates. J.D. Vance is probably the best example of that. Governor DeWine won by 22 points in Ohio. J.D. Vance won by 6, 7. That's a 15, 16-point swing. And J.D. Vance was having a lot of trouble against Brown. And it was McConnell that came in with money to help J.D. Vance, who was having trouble raising money. Trump didn't put in a penny. So the idea that Donald Trump would help get these people nominated, so what? Supporting Tim Scott for Senate in South Carolina, who's going to win by 80 points, that's meaningless. Richard's point is 100% right. You may help these people get the nomination, but can they win the general election? A strong argument can be made that Donald Trump is responsible for Republicans losing 6 Senate seats: New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, 3 in Georgia, and 1 in Arizona. He's a disaster.
Eric, I agree with you, and we've said this on the show. The mistake that Donald Trump did make is that after he secured those nominations, he did not unleash the financial resources and the wherewithal into those races. McConnell did in the general election. I don't think we saw that in this runoff election, which, as you and the judge pointed out, was very important because it would have maintained the Senate 50-50 and maintained the ability for us to dictate where these investigations would go. It would give the Johnsons of the world the ability to also seek investigations and such and whatnot. But here's the other thing.
All right, let me wind up this segment by saying as follows. Let's talk about Biden for a minute. I'm talking about as a Democrat now. I think Joe Biden's administration is a failed administration. I think his policies have been an absolute disaster for this country. Whether you're talking about inflation, whether you're talking about the border, whether you're talking about national security interests, I believe it's an absolute disaster for this country to have a continuation of the Biden administration. He's totally in the pocket of the left wing. I think the left wing is destroying this country in terms of national security, the economy. It's not fighting the threats of China and of Russia. They're destabilizing this country with their wokeism. Biden has to get off the stage. Trump has to get off the stage. And if the Democrats are going to be responsible, they have to be grown-ups too. Just like the Republicans have to get Trump off the stage, they have to get Hillary Clinton off the stage, they have to get Kerry off the stage, and they have to get Biden off the stage. This country needs fresh blood, fresh faces, people who can unite this country with a common vision to understand that America is at risk. The Chinese are playing a long game, and we're losing. They have a better economy than we do. They're better on the military than we are. They're making all kinds of incursions into our society. We have a real existential threat, and we have to get past these 2 old men who are not up to the game of preserving, defending this great democracy. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Eric Levine, noted attorney and commentator, and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Stay tuned for more interesting conversation. Thank you.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
All right, this is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. We're continuing our interesting discussion today. In the studio with us is Eric Levine, noted attorney and political commentator, an essayist, and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. We're going to shift gears. We're going to turn our attention to Biden's relationship with the state of Israel and what's motivating Biden here and why this is a dangerous game for both Israel and the United States. Eric, You just wrote a very interesting essay on this, which has been published across the country. Would you please discuss it for our audience?
So consistent with what we were talking about before with Joe Biden, whether he's going to run, leave the stage, I happen to think he's going to run again. And as a sitting president, I think it's unlikely he'll get a challenge. But to the extent that he's concerned about a challenge, he's concerned about a challenge from the left. So he continues to move left, and that includes his policy vis-a-vis Israel. So 3 events have recently occurred that evidence this. The first, there was a shooting. There was a death of an American Palestinian journalist in Jenin, the West Bank, which is well known as a hotbed for terrorism. There was a shootout between the Israeli Defense Forces and terrorists in Jenin, and Shireen Abu Akleh, the journalist, was shot and killed in the crossfire. The Israelis conducted an investigation. The Palestinians conducted an investigation. The results of those investigations were shared with the United States government, and the State Department issued a statement saying this was a tragic accident. It was not done intentionally. We're not sure whose bullet killed the journalist. It was likely an IDF force bullet, but we're not certain. But regardless, there's no evidence that it was done intentionally. So that was months ago. Now, all of a sudden, the FBI announces that it is going to investigate inside Israel the killing. Of course, the FBI has no jurisdiction inside Israel. And of course, the Biden administration knows that the Israelis will never agree to have their sovereignty compromised in that way. So notwithstanding that they believe it was an accident, why would the FBI announce they're going to have an investigation? Because shortly in the days after the shooting, AOC stood up at the floor of the House and said, we can't do this. We can't allow this shooting to go unpunished. Bizarrely, she connected it with, we can't even pay for health care in the United States. We have to stop funding Israel. I'm not sure what the nexus is between health care and Israel and the shooting of the journalist, but so be it. The message to Joe Biden is very clear. We progressives on the left who are hostile to Israel expect you, Joe Biden, to put distance between the United States and Israel and support the Palestinian cause. So this investigation is being announced strictly politically because the administration knows it's never going anywhere. And particularly in the wake of the State Department conclusion that it was an accident, why do it but for political reasons to appease the progressive left? The second example is this past weekend, J Street, which is the progressive response to AIPAC, held its annual conference. Now let's understand what J Street's mission is. It says in its mission statement that it exists to create a Palestinian state, and that Israel cannot consider itself a legitimate state unless and until the Palestinians have their own state. Now, of course, J Street has no moral authority or legal authority to confer on Israel its right to exist. It has a right to exist. It exists, whether or not J Street likes it or not. But J Street is a progressive entity and is a nemesis of the state of Israel. Lo and behold, all of a sudden, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, is going to be a keynote speaker at J Street. Unprecedented. Never happened before. Why would Joe Biden approve Antony Blinken appearing at J Street? Again, to put distance between the United States and Israel, to appease the progressive left, who hold out there the ahistorical, false narrative that Israel is an apartheid, racist, colonial state oppressing its people of color, like the Palestinians, like the United States does in the United States, because their position is that America is a systemically racist country. Both are lies, but Joe Biden wants to appease the progressive left. The third and most famous is, of course, the Iran nuclear deal. That is the crown jewel in the let's put distance between the United States and Israel agenda. Now, it's an Obama legacy, but the Biden White House is populated almost exclusively with Obama retreads. And for these folks, it's more important that it's better to pursue a failing policy or a failed policy than admit a mistake. But from their perspective, it's not a mistake, because if we shift the center of gravity in the Middle East from Israel to Iran, that's an affirmatively good thing, because we don't like Israel. And historically, we all remember President Obama's apology tour when he first was elected president. He and the progressive left always believed continue to believe, that American power exercised abroad is a force for evil and needs to be constrained and brought home. And to the extent that we've done evil things, we need to atone for those sins. And one of those sins is this perception that the United States was involved in a coup in the 1950s that overthrew Mossadegh and put the Shah in power. And we are to feel guilty for that in the wake of the Cold War. So from Biden's perspective, I have to continue to pursue the Iran deal, because if I back away, then I'm giving into that evil Zionist entity, which will make the progressives nuts, and I'm going to offend the Obama folks. So for those three reasons, I mean, so to appease the progressive left and to help stave off a challenge, a primary challenge from the left, Joe Biden is beginning to put distance between himself and Israel. And now and that it's a terrible mistake. It weakens American national security. The American-Israeli relationship is a critical component of the fabric of American national security. The Middle East is stable when Israel is stable. The Middle East is stable when the United States and Israel are close allies. And the world watches how the United States treats Israel. Because if the United States is willing to put distance between itself and probably its most reliable ally in the world, enemies know that America could be pushed, and they're no longer afraid of us. And our allies wonder if we can be relied on. It's a really dangerous game.
Jesse, what say you? Jesse.
I completely agree with you, Eric, and with your essay. I mean, as the way you just laid it out there. I don't understand how any sitting elected official can look at Israel and not have it be a partner and not look into being its closest partner. There's no way in there. I mean, if you care about America, you care about our Constitution, you care about national security, you can never think about moving the center of as you said, the center of gravity from Israel to Iran. It just does not work. It doesn't compute. We're just asking ourselves to set ourselves up for more destruction, more attacks. Well, I don't understand, and maybe you can educate me on this a bit, you and the judge. How do leaders such as Chuck Schumer go along with these policies and allow them to move forward? I know Lee Zeldin was an ardent advocate for Israel and the Netanyahu and against the Iran deal. He was on the House floor and helped Netanyahu actually join in making a remarks to the joint Congress back during the Obama administration. I just don't see how those political dynamics, Schumer, the Democratic establishment, would go along with policies that are so destructive and so anti-Israel when they've been part of this alliance for generations.
Let me. We have just a couple of minutes in this segment. Let me answer it this way: it's all political opportunism. It's all about the threat of the left-wing progressives. Schumer was very cute when they did the Iran deal. Number one, the Iran deal never should have been done except as a treaty. As a treaty, it would have failed. Now, what Schumer did is he voted against the deal, against it. In other words, he didn't rally the Democrats against the deal because he winked at Obama. Obama winked at him, and they let Schumer, as they say in the legislative process, off the hook. So he could vote that way to go back to the Jewish community in New York State and say, look, I voted against it, but he never did anything to stop it. And this deal is a dangerous deal, and it's a threat to the United States. Understand this. Iran is an existential threat to the United States, and it has to be stopped. It has to be contained. And the countervailing force against Iran in that part of the world, indeed worldwide, is Israel. And it's not because, by the way, the American people love the Jews in Israel so much. It's because it's what Israel brings to the table. They bring in technology, they bring in economic development, they bring in intelligent issues. I'm talking about national security intelligence issues. They tell you what's really going on in the Middle East, and the United States can't get that information but for Israel. Eric, finish up the segment with your comment.
So Chuck Schumer's conduct is even more insidious and disturbing than you described. Remember, Chuck Schumer waited to announce what his vote was going to be until he learned that Obama had enough votes in the Senate to pass it. So he was no leader, that is for certain. And let's remember, the Iran deal is a myth. It provides a legal path to a nuclear weapon for Iran. It doesn't prevent it. It provides a ballistic missile system for it to deliver that warhead. Does not stop the ballistic missile.
And it provides money for terrorism activities.
Right. It lifts sanctions on the Iranians so that they can have tens of billions of dollars to fund their military, to fund their terrorist activities, including Hezbollah and Hamas, and to build its own economy, make it a first world economy. Everything that John Kerry represented to the American people, that all paths to a nuclear warhead are prevented, was a lie. Anytime, anywhere inspections was a lie. That there would be no ballistic missile development was a lie. That money would be used for schools and infrastructure was a lie. And they knew at the time it was a lie. It was all to sell the deal. They were going to make any deal that they could reach. It didn't have to be a good deal. By definition, if they could make a deal under their definition of a good deal,
it's a win.
It was a good deal.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a break before we come back to our final segment of this show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and our special guest, Eric Levine, noted attorney and political commentator. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
All right, welcome back to the final segment of the Long Island Report for this week. With me is Eric Levine, distinguished attorney, political commentator, and essayist, and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. So it seems to me that one of the big stories in the last week is the Elon Musk story. He's bought Twitter. He's now revealing what went on the inside during the 2020 presidential campaign, and even before the campaign officially took off, to try to suppress the news of the Hunter Biden laptop and what that meant in terms of the allegations that there was influence peddling by the Biden family, what they call Biden Inc., to sell national interests out for money from places like Russia, Ukraine, China, and other places. It was a big story. It was suppressed. The question becomes, who did what? When did they know it? Was the FBI involved? Was the national security types, the 51 who said this was Russian disinformation? What is this really about, and what's the threat to America? Eric, why don't you begin?
So I guess there are two groups that we have to worry about. One is the Biden campaign, and the other is the Obama White House. Let's remember, this all happened while Barack Obama was president. So let's talk about the campaign for a second. There appears to be communications between the Biden campaign and Twitter, asking them to suppress the story. And there was and Twitter went scratching their heads. What's the best way to be able to effectuate? What's the explanation we can give for squelching the story that it wasn't confirmed? But they knew it was true. But so by the Biden administration getting this favor from Twitter, it is truly an in-kind contribution under the federal election laws. Now,
hold on, I have to correct you. It wasn't the Biden administration.
I mean, the Biden campaign. My mistake. I apologize.
Go ahead.
Biden campaign. It is an in-kind contribution under the federal election laws. What's an in-kind contribution? If somebody donates money, that's a contribution. But you can get benefits for a campaign that you can place a value on that isn't cash, and the Federal Election Committee will place a value on it, and they'll say this is a contribution. And there are limits to how much you can contribute. So the question is whether or not Twitter, in making this in-kind contribution, violated the federal election laws, and whether or not the Biden campaign willingly and knowingly participated in that violation of law. That'd be very interesting to see. As relates to the Obama White House, the Obama administration, to a point that Richard was raising, what was the role of the FBI? What was the role of the intelligence community? Where were they turned loose to put their finger on the scale of an election? I think given past experience, particularly the Russia hoax, it is not beyond imagination to believe that perhaps the FBI and the intelligence community did play a role in suppressing the Hunter Biden story. Now, we know from my earlier statements on the show, I am no Donald Trump fan, but two things can be true. Donald Trump can be a terrible candidate and a danger to the United States, but so can the Obama administration. So can the Biden campaign and the Biden administration. So can certain elements of the FBI. So can certain elements of the intelligence community. We need to apply the same set of standards to everyone. The rules need to apply equally to everyone. And if there was a violation of the law, people need to be held to account. And there should be an announcement by DOJ immediately that there's going to be an investigation between the connection between the Obama White House and Twitter and the Biden campaign.
What do you keep
and
saying
Twitter.
the Obama White House when it was the Trump administration?
No, during the
You told me it was the Obama White House in 2016, but 2020 it was a Trump.
Correct. I apologize. So the Biden campaign, we need to know should there be an investigation. The Russia. My mistake is the Russia hoax.
Russia hoax. Obama had the White House.
Right.
This latest
right
Biden suppression story. Trump had the White House.
Correct.
But you had the deep state, the operatives in the former operatives in the intelligence community who said this is Russian disinformation, the so-called 51 who said that, and they were lying, and what the FBI knew and didn't do because they had that laptop for a year and they kept it under wraps.
Correct. So DOJ needs to launch an investigation into what was the connection between the Biden campaign and and Twitter.
Jesse, what say you?
I completely agree. I mean, think about it. You two guys are probably two of the smartest guys in the state or in the country.
We are definitely two of the
collusion.
smartest guys in this room.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it.
Yes. As being the only two guys.
The only two guys in this room, and you're on the phone. Yes, we're the two smartest guys in this room. We'll stipulate to that.
We're also the two dumbest, but that's okay.
But the fact that there's so much corruption, suppression, collusion going on that it involves multiple White Houses, multiple campaigns, but it also involves the deep state that we were speaking about. Think about it. It's the Russian collusion story. It's also now the Twitter suppressing the post-Hunter Biden story 4 years later. It's amazing. And I think that this is a definite example. And now Elon Musk is pulling back the curtain and letting everyone see the dirty laundry and how, legislation gets made. I guess, that old proverb there. But the fact of the matter is that the Democrats and this deep state have been suppressing and placing their thumb on the elections over the last 4 years. They've done it. They tried it in 2016. They were not successful. They were successful in part in 2020 because the fact that even the chief censor of Twitter, who finally who's independent now and left the firm, he admitted that he was wrong. It did not meet that the New York Post story should never have been suppressed. It never should have been stopped from being flowing. This is a problem where we see the machinations and the incest between big tech, big corporations, and the Democratic Party and the establishment.
What's deeply troubling is the reports that 16% of the people, Democrats, who voted for Biden, if they had known this story, broken by Miranda Devine of the New York Post, if they had known this story, they would have voted against Joe Biden for the presidency, which could very well have been enough to turn around 3 or 4 states, because you're talking about maybe 100,000 votes in these 3 or 4 states in total. That could have changed the whole outcome of the election. So while Trump may be paranoid, he may be obsessed with his victimization, there's real truth to the fact that the intelligence community, when they knew they were lying, they did it. Okay, they called it Russian disinformation. They knew it was nonsense because it was a real live laptop, and the laptop's communications spoke for themselves. The FBI sat on it. The FBI met on a regular basis with big tech. They kept this story down. That's a very, very big story. And the Democratic National Committee and the Biden campaign were part and parcel of sharing information with big tech. That is a real, real problem as far as I'm concerned. Now, I want to change the focus. And I want to say to you, every time you think that California has done the craziest possible thing they can do, they put one more nail into their coffin. And what particularly troubles me is you have some of the less than stellar members of the state legislature in the state of New York who love the idea so much that they're trying to propose it for New York State as well. And I'm talking about proposed reparations for African Americans because of slavery. Eric, what do you think about the idea of giving reparations generations after generations after generations later? And is this a good unifying principle and a good economic principle for the state of California, the state of New York, and indeed for this country?
It's nuts. I think that's really the only way you could describe it. First of all, who gets the reparations? Does LeBron James get the reparations? He's been so oppressed. How many tens of millions of dollars does he make a year? So this whole idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the neo-Marxist approach to of America, that everything must be viewed through the lenses of race and gender, is really quite damaging and really quite un-American. Martin Luther King had it right. Judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. For the folks who are in favor of reparations, for the progressives, for the neo-Marxists, you are no more or no less than the color of your skin. It's the exact opposite message of what MLK espoused and preached, which is the gold standard. And when you get to this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's understand what these terms mean. These are Orwellian terms. Diversity means in everything but thought. You're not allowed to have any diverse thoughts. You can have different colors, you can have different genders, but we can't have any diverse thoughts. Equity, I don't know what equity is. I know what equality is. Everybody needs to be treated the same.
Equity is redistribution.
Exactly.
Equal outcome.
Right,
equal outcome.
Exactly. It's not a guaranteed equal opportunity for all Americans to achieve. It is an equal outcome, and that requires coercion. That requires taking from other people. It's the concept, the failed concept that the pie is static. It can't get any larger, and therefore we must redistribute wealth from one group to another group, not rewarding risk takers, not rewarding entrepreneurs, but punishing them and then taking from them and giving to others. So the equity piece is insane. And inclusion, again, you'll be included if you agree with us. If you don't agree with us, you're excluded. So in order to be diverse, to believe in DEI, you really have to be a racist, because you have to believe that everything is based on everything is seen through the lens of race. You are good or if you're white, you're a racist, and if you're black or Hispanic or a person of color, you're not. And that's just patently absurd. There are white racists, there are black racists, there are Hispanic racists, there are women racists, there are men racists. The whole thing is crazy. And this reparations is just part of it. All I know is that when there was slavery in the United States, reprehensible, disgusting. I mean, there's nothing, there's no redeeming value of it. My ancestors were having the tar kicked out of them by the Tsar in Russia. I'm not quite sure why I'm paying reparations. What have I done?
Jesse, final thoughts for this segment.
My final thoughts is I completely agree with Eric. I mean, the way he outlined it, it's a mistake. It's not going to help. It's not going to help unite this country. It's not going to help diversity, equality, or inclusion. It's actually going to do the opposite. As you said, it's going to continue to divide us. And it's, unfortunately, the way I look at it, I'm a political guy, and the way I look at it, it's just for the purposes of making political points and trying to continue to capture a segment of the voting population that the Democratic Party can grab onto. I believe it's not really philosophical. I believe it's all political, and I think that hopefully people come to fruition and understand that this is the way to vote.
Well, I want to thank Jesse Garcia, the chairman of the Republican Party, as well as Eric Levine, distinguished attorney, political commentator, and essayist, for another interesting discussion. We look forward to being back with you next week on the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg signing off. Thank you for your attention.